It's the left versus the right. In the right corner, it's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa. In the left corner, it's Anthony Weiner. It's a 77 WABC debate. Heavyweight slugfest. On New York's news and talk station, 77 WABC.
So welcome to Left versus Right. Anthony Weiner on your left, Curtis Sliwa on your right. We're less than 2 weeks away from the big show. Nervous about your guy?
No, actually, with Trump, I think he's been calmer than he was in 2016 when he didn't expect to be elected, and 2020 when he thought he was elected. I think he's a lot calmer.
He's got a lot writing on it. So weird thing coming up tomorrow night. You've got Trump at Madison Square Garden in the heart of blue New York City. Kamala Harris appeared in Texas, in Houston, with Beyonce in Texas. Weird places the candidates are the last days of the campaign. What do you think it's all about?
Well, I'm thinking that from Harris's point of view, it's such a close Senate race because nobody loves Ted Cruz. I mean, he's a loathable person. Even people who are going to vote for him said, man, he's this nasty, arrogant guy. And the guy running against him, formerly a Dallas Cowboy, well-spoken, has moved to the middle. He's done a Tom Swazi in this election. You know, he's patrolling the border, you know. Yeah. And so it's a close race. And so I'm thinking Harris is saying with Beyonce, who came out of Houston, and I can really generate a big urban vote, which, look, you got 4 cities, over 1 million people. You got Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, huge metropolitan areas. We may be able to turn Texas blue, and then it's over.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way Republicans can win there. Also, the other thing about it, and the same is true of Trump being at Madison Square Garden, today's, you know, when you hear that the candidate said something or you see something in your feed, how often do you really know where they were really sitting? If you're in, like, Ohio, a small-town newspaper will make a big deal. Okay, they came to our town.
Correct.
But you are now in New York City. You're basically on the world stage the same way in Houston. Look, you're right. If Harris is looking at the same polls we all are, which every state is tied, she's probably trying to find, I need to steal a state somewhere, not in the literal sense. I got my Republican friends all nervous that they're trying to steal it again. But if they can flip one state, Florida or Texas, even though you really have to squint to see a way that the Democrats win those kind of states.
They probably have internal polling.
Right.
And we've seen it's a very close race between Cruz and the Democrat. Very close. You see that Cruz is worried. So I think people are seeing that possibly because Cruz is so unlikable, it could be a detriment to Donald Trump at the top.
Yeah, it could be. And the other thing is, and we talked about it on the Rip and Read on Friday, all it takes is a couple of % off in a big demographic. And all of the polls, suddenly you have a pretty easy win. For example, Donald Trump's biggest base, non-college educated white people. If he hemorrhages a couple of points there, it's such a large number of people, maybe Harris wins. Same way with blacks. They represent 20% of the country. If they have 2 or 3 points difference in the way the pollsters have been seeing it, and it can swing the other way. And so maybe Harris says, "Listen, I'm going to try to surge black votes the same way Obama did." Why do you think she has not seen the same kind of black excitement that Obama did?
Well, because Barack Obama was the first. I mean, he was a smooth operator. First off, the fact that when he gave a speech in the Boston Gardens the year that John Kerry was nominated as a candidate,
2004.
and people were saying, this guy's the next president, like they said at the Moscone Center in San Francisco when Mondale was nominated with Ferrara. Oh, Mario Cuomo's the next president. His oratorical skills were so magnificent that I said right away, I got a call from a Democrat who said, oh, this is the next president. I said, nobody named Barack Obama is ever going to become president of the United States. But even now, when he's on a stage, he commands the audience.
Yeah, it's a very different thing.
If Barack Obama were the candidate now, he would beat Donald Trump.
I think that's probably right. The other thing that's going on is that Obama was clearly the change candidate in a change election then. In this race, kind of both of them are trying to say I'm a change. Kamala Harris obviously being a black woman, but also Donald Trump, who he looks different than every other politician that's ever come before him. So if you really are an electorate that they say we want change, it's not necessary. Barack Hussein Obama trumped everybody when it came to being the change candidate, even Hillary Clinton in 2008.
He said Hussein Obama. I did not.
That's
but
right.
by the way, I noticed this strategy They're looking at the Nikki Haley vote. Remember, Nikki Haley had run in Pennsylvania, even though she had dropped out. Her name was still on the ballot in the primary. Got about 150,000 votes.
Yeah,
17%.
she got millions of votes around the country.
Right, against Trump. So I noticed that the coach, who nobody can find any longer, the vice presidential candidate, it seems to be on the shelf. And then Liz Cheney appeared with Vice President Harris 4 times.
Right.
So my impression is they know that the Bush wing, the McCain wing, and the Cheney wing of the party are not happy with Trump. And they figure they could get women from that sector, the Nikki Haley sector. And if you notice, Trump has resisted putting Nikki Haley out on the stump, which I think is a big mistake. And I think they can get enough votes there to win Pennsylvania.
Well, here's what if you look at the big picture, a third of the country is Republican, a third of the country is Democrat, a third are unaffiliated. You need to get 95% of your team and then fight for the other ones. So like Trump or don't like Trump, there are a lot of Republicans who throughout the primaries were saying we ain't with them. Even as you pointed out, long after it mattered, people were still getting off their couch and going to vote for Nikki Haley. That tells you that there are disaffected voters out there. The Democrats had a different problem. We were just staying home under Biden. Yeah. We were like, oh my God, I can't go out. But they weren't going to go vote for the other guy. I don't know if it's the case. I think it's ironic that someone named Cheney, is supposed to inspire Democrats to get up and vote. But, that we're supposed to use it.
I think if I'm with Team Harris, I say, look, where are they going to go anyway? They're going to vote for Jill Stein? Whatever group is going to vote for Jill Stein, the 1%, they're going to vote for her anyway because she is so anti-Israel. She is, quote, the peace candidate. Yeah. Let's face it. Harris can't declare herself to be the peace candidate. Neither can Donald Trump. So they figured she's got the 1%. But these disaffected Republicans could be the difference, especially women.
Yeah. I just on that point, though, under Biden and Harris got us out of Afghanistan, haven't gotten us into any other wars. Biden and Harris can say what Trump always lies about on the stump. We didn't have any boots on the ground anywhere during my administration. We totally did.
Still,
but
let's
listen,
face it.
Here's the other.
If you're saying who is the peace candidate in this election cycle, it's Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate.
But here's the point to remember. Is that if you look at these polls, and by the way, the polls are dead heat. I think you'd agree with that. I don't know,
it's jump ball. Jump ball.
Dead heat. So, normally you might say, all right, I'm not going to bother pursuing this 1% of the vote, but now you absolutely have to.
And in fact, first time, Team Harris is taking out ads, billboards, and advertisements against Jill Stein in Michigan because they know that some of the Arabic American vote, some of the pro-Palestinian vote there is going to go to Jill Stein.
The other thing that happens about this time is that a lot of consultants and candidates are covering their ass.
Yes.
They don't want to have people say, we didn't do A, B, or C. And when you have $1 billion campaign, you can basically do billboards and be able to point to the back.
That's the advantage that Harris has. She has so much more money than Donald Trump.
Yeah,
but the question is, how are you spending the money?
Well, also, you've got Musk openings. I think, maybe you disagree with this, there is a point of diminishing returns. There's only so many TV commercials, so many door knockers you can
commercials.
do.
I think it's really get out the vote.
Get out the vote. I know people talk about it a lot. At the end of the day, very rarely does it amount to much at the end. We have so few undecided people. You're going to say, okay, if I knock on their door 20 times rather than 15 times, it'll make a difference.
Carry them on your back.
I am not. I mean,
give them $1 million.
And then I just talked about this on my show, The Middle. And then Musk is like paying people $1 million if we'll go out.
Well, I was chastised because on the air I said I'll give you free New Park Pizzeria if you come, for Tom Sullivan for assembly against Stacey Pfeiffer. They said you can't do that.
You got to be careful. You got to be careful.
Right. Meantime, Musk giving away $1 million.
I used to do this joke on the campaign trail. I'd say, don't forget to vote. It's a Tuesday this year, except for my Republican friends. They can roll in anytime they want on Wednesday or Thursday. And I made that joke one too many times. And then finally someone complained to the FEC. I'm like, come on, I'm just kidding around. But you're right. It's serious business. But the one thing that has changed in the messaging is now Kamala Harris is saying the word fascist. Democrats, we've been saying that. You and I talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago. The difference now is that some of Trump's closest allies, the guy, his Mark Esper, Milley, and now his longest-serving chief of staff, when asked, does he have fascist tendencies, which isn't the same, but basically, they said, yes, he does. I mean, what are you convinced? The guy says he's going to prosecute civilians for protesting. He says he expects the generals to follow his orders even if they're unconstitutional. Sounds a big fascist to me.
There are three things to that. First off, most Americans don't know what a fascist is. Couldn't pick out a fascist from a socialist or a communist.
But you do.
And these words, only because I've followed it. But most Americans, it's like, what? What is that?
But what do you think? You're one voter.
Yes.
You hear his closest allies, his closest aides, say he's got these tendencies.
Well, you see, this
and then he uses language that evokes Hitler and Mussolini. I mean...
Yeah, but this is his great fallback, and he does have this, is that when these same generals were, encouraging Bush 43 and Cheney, get into Iraq, find those weapons of mass destruction, to his credit, Donald Trump was not one of those cheerleaders, along with our own Bernard
Well, Donald
McGurk.
Trump was all over the map. Donald Trump was in favor of it until it started going south, and he bailed, kind of like I did.
It was very difficult.
I understand,
for
but
somebody on, quote, the right, like Bernard McGurk or Donald Trump, to suggest we shouldn't have gone in there.
Particularly in New York, New York City guy.
Yes.
But this is not about what position he might have taken on a strategic question.
Yes.
This is fundamental. Using U.S. troops against... He suggested Schiff. They should prosecute U.S. citizens for protesting his policies.
Well,
that's very different.
If the Dodgers win the World Series, and I hope they don't, against my beloved Yankees, they will have a victory parade, and Steve Garvey will be there. Because remember, Steve Garvey, in addition to being a Padre, was part of the great L.A. teams of Tommy Lasorda that we beat twice, and then we lost to once in those 70s.
He's turned out to be
I could see that could be his moment.
He's turned out to be an excellent candidate for the United States Senate. Boy, oh boy, he is not big. All right, so you want to bob and weave. You don't want to talk about this fascism.
I'm telling you, we look at Trump's first 4 years. He didn't do it when Black Lives Matter and Antifa were rampaging in cities.
No, he actually did. In Washington, D.C., when there were protests, he called out the military. The military says, we won't go because the National Park Police and everyone else, and people, were trampled and stomped on because they were protesting against him.
Anthony, they were pulling down statues. They were desecrating property. And the local official, the D.C. mayor, wouldn't do anything.
Hold on a second.
Wouldn't do anything.
Yes, we don't turn on military. All right. Would you vote for a candidate who suggests turning the military against protesters in the United States?
Well, it depends on what the situation is. If there's rioting and looting and shooting, we've done that before.
All right, let's say protesters at all.
We've done that before.
Let's say you're a United States senator who investigated you. You should. Is it fascism to call the U.S. military on those people?
Come on, they've investigated Donald Trump every which way.
That's right, and he says he wants to use the military to get back.
Anthony,
listen,
there's nothing that suggests in this guy's lifetime that he's a fascist.
Wait a minute.
A fascist.
You don't want to say that.
No elections. I'm the dictator,
yes.
And it's government that controls industry. This guy is
no.
capitalist.
Government and controlling industry, that can be anything. That can be communist.
National socialist, that's what a fascist is.
But a fascist is someone who believes that he, meaning the president, is in charge and that protesting the president is to be disloyal to our country. You don't believe that. I don't believe that. A president that believes that. And now, I just want to point out, he is immune from prosecution because of the
remember.
So here's what
you so love the military. Remember that famous scene on the tarmac as Bush 41 was hovering above, which Lieutenant General said, "I'm in charge."
Yeah.
You remember that?
Alexander Haig?
That's
who are you referring
right.
to? Yeah.
Generals said, you're now loving generals, right? He basically said, I'm taking over the country.
Absolutely not. We had the same problem then. But that's different. If you have a military... The point that we're making now is that if President Trump gets reelected president on the 21st and he says, I want to go...
that he's going to want to settle all scores like
I want to go
Michael
arrest Anthony Weiner because I disagree with what he has to say.
But you are worried that he's going to want to settle all scores.
No, I am worried that we don't take him at his word about stuff. That we say, don't worry, he just talks. Okay. Now, first of all, we saw in the first term he did indeed try to prosecute his enemies. He did indeed try to prosecute Comey. He did indeed try to prosecute the Clintons. He does...
Excuse me. Hillary was screaming that Comey cost her the election against Trump.
Well, this is close to home for me, but yes. Any other? Yes.
Remember, he had a chance to whack Comey in the beginning. Remember when he was sworn in and said, my audience is bigger than Barack Obama. Remember, what people forgot is both sides would have applauded him at that point if he got rid of Comey, and he kept him on.
What point do you
Remember,
make?
he said, I'm going to lock up Hillary, and then he says, oh, Hillary.
No, he prosecuted. He tried to prosecute Hillary Clinton.
Well, come on. You know it's a lot of bluster with Donald
By the way,
Trump.
you don't believe he's going to be better at all of this score? Look, I think that everything that he said and done, if we take it seriously, looks like fascism.
Looks like fascism.
Yeah, I'm saying that I mean, everything that he said.
He's not fascist. I mean, that would be the same thing. All the candidates who are running on the left, my people call them communists.
Can you tell me another candidate for president who has ever said that we should turn the military against protesters?
Well, let's see. Andrew Jackson, his favorite president, came pretty close to doing that.
That's how far you got back. You got to go.
Democrat.
All right, let me do one more issue before we go to the break.
Okay.
I still hear your wackadoo friends in the Republican Party going on about this McDonald's thing.
Yes.
Why would she lie about working at McDonald's? There's no evidence that she did. Why are you focusing on this so much?
She got caught. She said something that probably did not occur.
Wait, you think what a strange thing to make up.
Somebody would have said, yeah, I worked with her in McDonald's, or I was her manager, or I'm the person who hired. Somebody would have emerged.
For a summer job 30 years ago, are you high? No way, man.
Look, 1 out of every 8 people has worked for McDonald's.
That's the point. And by the way, the strange thing is, if you believe that she made that up, you'd have to say to yourself, why make up such a very specific thing that, I mean, it's not such a killer thing.
It's not like I served in Vietnam, like the senator from Connecticut, who obviously wasn't serving
It's not.
there.
What kind of aggrandizement is it to say that I worked at McDonald's?
But it was a bit of a faux pas.
Well, how? In what way? If it's true, let's start. Yes. If you believe it's not true, you have some burden to say, all right, is there a single person who says it's not true? You just made it up. And now I hear CNN, Fox says, well, where's her pay stubs? I don't have a pay stub from the Brooklyn Bagel Bakery when I was in high school.
But the point being is, by now, somebody would have seen her in a Mickey D's or worked with her or been a show. That's
how we're going to judge whether you did your summer job.
But look, in a campaign, when you find somebody who says something and you do your negative research, which is what 10 cents of every dollar goes into, they can't find anything. But the photo up of Donald Trump at Mickey D's, which he loves. Remember, even though RFK Jr. is saying, Donald Trump and we're going to make America healthier, I said, are you kidding? Donald Trump eats McDonald's all the time. Fish fillets, Diet Cokes, Big Macs, fries. I mean, he's the fast food king, but they'll stand up there.
Well, but we're
going to make America healthier.
That's not even the biggest problem. You have Donald Trump, who takes credit for the vaccine, sometimes, and the number one who says the vaccine is killing us.
No, I understand.
And so the hypocrisy is like off the
There's hypocrisy on both sides.
But
on the McDonald's thing, just looking at him as a potential employee, because I hired hundreds and I had to get rid of dozens. He's pretty damn good at that fire station.
By the way, and I talked about this on my podcast. A
little too much salt, but pretty good.
And this is in 2009. I was getting ready to run for mayor again. And I had this idea. I called my chief of staff. Says, I want to go travel around the city once a week, and I want to go do a job of a middle class person to kind of live there. It's a brilliant idea. We started to do a little advancing on it, and people didn't like it. Why? Who do you think you are? That you can plop down here and do my job? Like, it kind of made to the worker. The worker like, wait a minute, no, this is what I do for a living. It requires a certain amount of skill. No politician in a suit can come in here and do it. So we didn't stop doing that. But there was a guy named Bob Graham in Florida. Remember, he used to have work-a-days.
But nobody's more synonymous with Mickey D's than Donald Trump, other than Ronald McDonald and maybe the Hamburglar, right? But let me tell you this, a trick for everybody out there. It's $6.50 now for a large fry. You can get a bag of Idaho potatoes for $5, but a lot of people don't like too much salt. The president put too much salt on, too much salt. So this is what you do. You go up to the counter. I have high blood pressure. I need unsalted fries. They have to wipe the bin. They have to put a new serving down. They put it in, and this is what I do all the time. They put it in so you have hot fries. You're paying $6.50. Then I said, could I have 2 salts there, please? And I put it on in front of them. Hey, take that. You're giving me these wilty fries and charging me $6.50.
Yeah, but the real problem with the fries, when they got rid of the lard and started cooking them in vegetable oil,
but McDonald's, that's the one thing that attracts you to Mickey D's. They seem, to most people,
if that guy with orange makeup ever served me in McDonald's, I think I'd want a refund. And we'll be right back on Left versus Right.
It's the left versus the right. In the right corner, it's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa. In the left corner, it's Anthony Weiner. It's a 77 WABC debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
So welcome back to Left versus Right. Anthony Weiner on your left, Curtis Sliwa on your right. If you miss any part of this program, you can get it as a podcast. Also get the Rip and Read. If you miss it live every day at noon, you can get that as a podcast as well. Also the Animal Welfare Hour, the Better Side of Midnight, you name it. And of course, you just listened to my show, The Middle. Let's talk a little bit. Donald Trump called into Katz and Cosby here at WABC this week, had some interesting things to say. He says some things that are not true. But putting that aside, one thing he said that caught my ear, because he says it a lot, he says, I'm up by a lot. I don't even need the votes. I just need them to come out. I'm up by a lot. I'm up by a lot. Now, you and I both know, we talked about it in the first segment, that he's not up by a lot. Why does he keep saying that? Is he trying to set us up that when the votes come in on Tuesday, he declares victory? He says, everyone knows I'm up by a lot.
Look, I've had a love-hate relationship with Donald Trump over the years, back to when he was Citizen Trump. I think he likes, you know how you have bad news bears, good news bears. He loves good news bears. So his main pollster, although he has many, is McLaughlin. McLaughlin knows always put him ahead of everybody. I don't care if you got to fudge numbers, because if you tell him he's behind, that's it. You're no longer going to be paid. He'll get other pollsters who will tell him
Curtis,
what he wants
reads the New York Times. He reads the Washington Post. He turns on Twitter. He knows this race is tied. Everyone's saying it over and over and over again.
But you see, McLaughlin always, tweaks it so that it sounds good. Pollsters, their lifeline is the candidate must be happy with the polls, or that's it, no more money.
So you think this man, who you think should be the president of the United States, is dumb enough to believe he's ahead by a lot?
Not dumb enough, but remember, he was influenced by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. Remember the Presbyterian Church now that has all the gay flags, Black Lives Matter. I don't think he goes there any longer. But the power of positive thinking. Did you ever read that book? So you look at a glass of water with nothing in it, and you somehow look at that as it being positive.
Yes. I know.
Yes.
All of our listeners know this thing is a dead heat, and this knucklehead comes on the radio and says, I'm up by a lot. This is not an accident, Curtis. He is trying to set the predicate for him to try to lie about the election again.
Oh, here you go. You're operating on old brain cells, Anthony Weiner.
You're operating the same thing you did last year. Everyone knows I won one. Everyone knows Roe v. Wade with people won. Everyone knows when, in fact, we know better. We believe we can read for ourselves.
You're hearing it from me. He lost the last election. And this time they're doing the right things. They're actually encouraging Republicans to vote early.
Yeah.
Vote by mail. All the things he said no to in the middle of the lockdown and what was a very difficult time for some people to get their vote in. He's had to be massaged into that. But now, although we're not as good as the Democrats at this, because you've been doing it a long time, more and more Republicans, as you see, are voting early. They're voting by mail. They're voting by paper. And I'm sure they'll take advantage of whatever method.
In 2020, he was told that the early votes are going to show that Democrats are ahead, that Republicans are ahead.
Yes.
And then as the paper is counted, the Democrats are going to move up.
Yeah.
Good. He said at the time, I'm going to declare victory, even though he knew he didn't win.
What Roger Stone told him, declare victory.
Right. Okay. So we both understand.
So technically he was correct. At that point, he had won.
That's a form of a lie. Don't you agree?
No, it's because every other Republican, remember? Every other Republican declared victory and then only to have to renege because the paper came in heavily for Democrats.
Every candidate who knows anything, and this guy apparently wants to be president, he should know enough.
Yes,
you should know that you wait till everything is counted. He doesn't want to wait because he wants to try to steal the election again. Don't you see this happening?
Now you're accusing him of stealing the election, whereas obviously you have some Republicans who accuse Democrats of stealing the election.
No, he tried to steal the election last time.
That's
what do you know? It's last time. It's 100%. It's 100% of our last elections.
Jump ball. It's 50-50 against Biden. He was 7 points behind.
No, he's up by a lot. He said
against Hillary. He was 6 points behind.
He said he's up by a lot.
Well, if, in fact, the polling data is similar to what it was before, he would be
Curtis,
ahead.
There's nothing wrong with saying your candidate's a habitual liar. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Just get it off your chest.
Hey, Anthony,
Get it off your chest.
I don't trust any politicians. They all lie.
Okay, including...
It's a question of lying.
Right, but they don't...
What degree of lying?
But they don't do what he does, which is take the lie and try to stop the transfer of power in our democracy, right?
We will say, didn't Joe Biden not get sworn in as president of the United States? Didn't you have a ride with Joe Biden who afterwards you realized, boy, this guy, we got to get him out of
Joe
here.
Biden did, because your guy failed because he's incompetent in everything, including stealing elections.
Well, he went to court and he lost.
No. He went to court
in every court.
He went to a court.
He went to the United States Supreme Court.
No,
and he lost.
January 6th was after those court cases.
Oh, you're still on January 6th. Come on.
Well, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about his court challenges.
Yeah, in November and December. He had, in January 6th. Oh, this is a good point.
He lost the court challenge.
Yeah, let me make this.
Including the United States
Let me make this
Supreme Court.
point, because you might have confused some of our listeners.
Yes.
On January 6th, when he was leading that insurrection, by the way, that rally was called...
I didn't know he was leading it.
It was called by him. Who called the rally?
I understand that, but he wasn't leading them in front charge.
He said, we've got to go fight, or else we're going to lose our rights. I'm going to meet you up at the top of the hill. Come on,
Did he show up?
He did show up.
Was he at the top of the hill?
No, he didn't, because he's a coward on top of everything else.
Now he's a coward, right?
Yes. He went to his little lunch place where he was sitting and watching for 3 hours while police officers were assaulted, something you disagree with and I disagree with. But I just want to make sure everyone understands this. November, December, there were court cases that had ruled that, no, you didn't win, pal. There were legislatures that had met and said, nope, you didn't win, pal. He was still there saying, go hang Mike Pence or go get Mike Pence.
He didn't say hang Mike
Pence.
You're
right. You're right. He said, we have to tell Mike Pence the right thing to do, and we have to fight like hell. And when he was told that Mike Pence, no, I'm talking about the attempted overthrow of our democracy, we know he lost. He's a loser. He went
back to Mar-a-Lago, and Joe Biden was sworn in as the new president.
We know he's lost and he's a loser. We know that. I'm talking about the insurrection.
Well, how is he a loser? He won in 2016 unexpectedly.
No, he lost. He lost as a loser in 2020, and to this day.
So he's got a split record. He won the unexpected race,
right,
and he thought he won 2020.
Right, and he's also
50-50.
Right, and then he led an insurrection.
You claim he led an insurrection.
Wait, who killed the rally that killed Ashley Barrett? Who called that? Who called people there?
Excuse me. Donald Trump supported them rallying.
No, he called. It was his rally. Who paid for the microphones? Who paid for the promotion? Who paid for the metal detectors that he wanted to take out?
That he wanted them to come in and take over the House of Representatives and the United States Senate.
Yes, of course. That's what he said.
How come
he said stop them from doing the count.
Why didn't Pelosi call the troops in? She had an opportunity to call the troops in.
Nancy Pelosi is a good troll. Troops. She's a member of the United States Congress.
I understand, but she.
Wait a minute, you understand? Then why'd you say it?
She didn't do it. She didn't call in the guard.
She doesn't have the power. Only the president does.
She just did.
She doesn't.
Look.
She doesn't. You can say
you can relive January 6th. I want to deal with the election in 2024 and what's going to come about in 2025.
No. January 6th was not another day. Insurrections that try to stop the free exercise of our Constitution don't happen every day. When was the last time it happened?
Anthony, obviously, people have seen it over and over. It hasn't convinced the majority of the electorate to keep this guy out of office.
It could be maybe because some people listen to explanations like yours and don't have them rebutted by people like me.
MSNBC exists by showing January 6th, 24 hours a day.
But does
Fox hasn't moved anybody.
By the way, did Fox report on it correctly, or did they pay $760 million for lying about it?
Well, they had to pay. They played Dominion.
Why did they pay?
Why did they pay? Because it was misinformation.
They lied.
Of course.
They lied. They lied.
I don't trust anybody.
And who listens? And
you trust only your side.
My side didn't lie. My side didn't pay anything.
No, the stuff was clean, right?
Wait a minute. Hold on. All of the stations, the
impeachment of Donald Trump
twice.
With his meeting with Zelensky.
Twice. He had impeached twice.
I understand that. They just wanted a gun.
Why
for
was
this
he
guy.
impeached twice?
Yeah, but I mean, that's your whole point of existing.
No.
Impeach Trump, impeach
Trump.
Wait,
you just said January 6th was my whole point. Now you're saying impeachment.
Haven't your Democrats
what about the crimes?
Haven't your Democrats said they're going to challenge the results if Trump is the winner? Jamie Raskin, hasn't he said that?
Hey, I believe
I mean, he's a key figure in the Democratic Party.
Challenging results happens hundreds of times in every election. No.
Challenging results.
This is why I think the American people have been misinformed. And I think, by the way, Curtis,
this is the issue of this election?
No,
with people barely able to pay for gas and food and their mortgage?
It might be the impeachment. It might be the 24 convictions. It might be the 27 women who accused him of sexual. It might be of him being convicted of rape. It might have been the insurrection.
Anthony,
it might have been his businesses fined millions of dollars.
It might have been him. You got to get out of your bubble. You got to get out of your bubble.
I'm just saying, I'm not done.
All this opportunity to convince America, and right now it's a jump ball. And that means non-MAGA people are voting for Trump because MAGA people are only about 35% of the electorate.
Well, let's find out. That doesn't change the fact. That when you say something like, "Well, they're going to contest the election," is the same as an insurrection. Contesting the election happens all the time. I'm sure there are lawsuits in your nomination, in your petitions, in your election results. When I ran for city council for the first time, Mike Garson sued because one of the polling places in a Jewish community was in a church, and they said the Jews can't go in. Litigation happens all the time.
Anthony,
insurrection has only happened once in our lifetime.
2024 and 2025. So you got to move on. I know you want to live back in 2020.
Hey, not for nothing.
That's over.
Insurrection is a big deal to me, not to you.
Okay, but apparently it isn't the number one issue on the voters because when they've been asked what are the key issues, it doesn't even surface.
Is it the being a convicted felon? Does that show up?
No, let's see. It's the economy, it's inflation, it's migration, and then abortion. Abortion's number 4.
Is it the 27 women accused of sexual misconduct?
Apparently that hasn't resonated.
Is it the 2 impeachments?
That hasn't resonated.
Is it the hundreds of millions of dollars that his companies have to pay?
Anthony, I know you're obsessed with this, but it's not even in the top 10 issues.
Wait, hold on. I got more. Okay. Is it the being found criminally liable for sexual abuse with Eugene Carroll?
Doesn't resonate.
No?
And the whole world saw it.
Hold on. Is it spray painting your face with orange paint before you go out the door in the morning?
Doesn't resonate. I'm sorry. A lot of Americans
that's
are
fair
in
enough.
that
That's fair
position.
enough. Let me a local thing. The New York Post endorsed Donald Trump. You didn't see that coming, did you?
Yes, I did.
You did because in 2020 they said he's 21. He's disqualified from ever holding office again. They said because
there's no doubt him and the Wall Street Journal owned by Murdoch. The Murdochs basically said we got to go with DeSantis. Remember,
right?
They promoted DeSantis. Even our own Levin, he was a DeSantis guy. A lot of people were doubting.
Right.
Only Sid really was standing up for him, and Greg Kelly was saying and Dominic Carter. But everybody else was saying, no, we got to go a different direction. Some said DeSantis, some said Nikki Haley. They had their shot in the primaries. They just weren't able to convince.
But here's the thing about the New York Post. The New York Post famously wrote in 2020 about the insurrection. They said that because of his role, Donald Trump can never hold office ever again, will never support him.
They weren't alone.
Okay, fair enough. If you're going to flip, which is fine, some people do, you've come up with explanations for why. I think immigration's more important than our Constitution, to summarize. The New York Post didn't even mention the flip-flop in their editorial. I mean, the amount of conservatives who have contorted themselves to this new version of the Republican Party really is shameful.
Yeah, well, let me tell you that it's the Murdochs who determine who they're going to support. They've kept the New York Post alive. Without them, there'd be no New York Post. Without Rupert, the old man, there'd be no New York Post.
So is right-wing media more powerful than left-wing media?
No. Look at left-wing media. I mean, I'm watching the other night, and this went from the sublime to the ridiculous. Charlemagne the God arguing with Anderson Cooper that he's called Donald Trump a fascist more times than Anderson Cooper. Yeah. And I'm saying, Anderson, why are you do 60 Minutes? You're supposed to be the inquisitor.
Well, this is what he said.
You did a good job with Harris.
But did you see the answer?
I give him props. He did a good job.
Did you see his answer? He took a run at MSNBC in his answer.
Yeah, but I'm saying to myself, come on,
But
guys.
in terms of numbers of people that watch Fox, numbers of people that listen to 77 WABC,
Correct.
Numbers of people that read the New York Post, etc. This whole idea. Now, Musk, the single biggest, and by the way, I notice I don't hear any politicians complaining about social media companies putting their finger on the scale for liberals. It does seem to me, for all the complaints about the media, this is a high time for conservative media.
Well, it's a 50-50 split, just like the country. If you look at all the different media outlets, mainstream versus cable versus
Fox is
online.
Fox is a lot bigger than the other two, I think. Again, I'm not a TV guy, I'm a radio guy.
Millions that watch. So I would say it's just like the rest of the country, 50-50. And it's good you have choice. You get to look at or listen to or read whatever you want to read. You can read what you don't agree with. You could read what you do agree with. I believe more is better than less.
I also believe that people are just reading and going to the locations that they agree with.
Well, of course, they want to be reinforced.
Like the number of people who write emails to John and to me about me being on the last hour. It's preposterous that anyone should even have.
Well, it is because you are the only legitimate Democrat. You used to be a liberal progressive, but they would take that away from you in a heartbeat now. It would say, he's no liberal and progressive. This guy's single payer. He was the head of all of you. But he was your grandfather. And they have basically said, no, he's not. He's one of those moderate conservative Democrats.
Well, this is one of the reasons this show is popular, is because I think that even hardcore Republicans, and that's 90% of our audience, still don't like one-hand clapping nonstop. They like to hear.
It's boring.
And it's also the reason why you're a success, is that you are not an always Trumper, you're not a never Trumper, you're a most of the time Trumper.
Anthony, when I hear our fellow hosts repeating, just like when I watch MSNBC and I see the host and hostesses repeating, I turn it off. So I said, I've already heard this.
I kind of have the same problem.
Do you have an original idea? Come on, give us something we don't know.
I kind of have the same problem. In fact, like the other day when Kamala Harris did the CNN town hall meeting, which your guy ducked, I didn't think she was great. I'll be honest. I didn't think she was great.
I thought Anderson Cooper was appropriate in terms of the way he handled.
Correct.
This is what we want from journalists.
And also, the questions that Kamala Harris got hung up on were obvious questions.
Yes.
Questions she must have been prepared for. What would you have done different? You and I have been candidates. We know there's a formulation that everyone does the question that they think is super clever, but it's not. You've got your answer.
First of all, she's not dumb. She's not stupid. She's not an idiot. She's in a sprint, and I'm sure they are looking at data that says the less things you pin yourself down on, the better. Remain the enigma, because people hate Trump, and some people love Trump. You're never going to get the Trump lovers. We got to depend on the Trump haters.
And she's also very cautious. And remember, Barack Obama, he didn't give a speech that wasn't on a teleprompter. He was very cautious also. Of course. Two people who aren't cautious, Anthony Weiner on your left, Curtis Sliwa on your right, and we'll be right back.
It's the left versus the right. In the right corner, it's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa. In the left corner, it's Anthony Weiner.
So welcome back to Left versus Right. Anthony Weiner on your left, Curtis Sliwa on your right. Let's do a little talk about one of my favorite subjects and yours, New York City politics.
Yes.
So already, we even had campaign 2024 still going on. And starting, there is already the feeding frenzy around campaign 2025. You have more than a passing interest in this. You've run for mayor before. I imagine you've given some thought to running again.
Hey, I'm running again, period. I'm running.
By the way, that reminds me. The number of times that candidates have said, I'm considering it, I'm forming an exploratory committee.
If this person runs, I won't run. No, I'm running. I don't care who's running, a special election. I'm running.
Right. And then I'm trying to decide. I'm talking to my family. Right. That's the other one. On the inverse, when someone resigns and said, I want to spend more time with their family.
You never did, pal, before. Now all of a sudden you miss your family.
So we've had a couple of people enter the race, neither of them household names, but the type of candidate that they are tells us a little something about the New York City electorate, both what people assume about it, but what they get wrong about it. A socialist assemblyman in Queens whose name escapes me. I think he's got a pro-Palestinian thing. I should know his name.
I think it's Zorhan or something to that.
He jumps in the race, raises a bunch of money, causes a big stir. To his credit, he is an open, clear-throated, socialist kind of guy, free buses and everything else, gets some support. But here's the question I want to ask you about him. Not necessarily about him. There is a presumption about the New York City electorate that it is bright blue, meaning super lefty. The number of conversations I have with people who are not New York City who think that AOC represents the mainstream of New York City, and I always explain to them, we're a fairly pragmatic, centrist kind. We're Democrats, no doubt about it. We wouldn't vote for Trump in a million years. Correct. What do you think as you start to see this field flesh out? There is a race to try to see who's going to be the most lefty candidate. Those guys don't usually win, though, do they?
Well, primaries, they can do relatively well with ranked choice voting if they actually form a coalition. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that.
Explain ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting in this case, you could have upwards of 5, because we're expecting a lot of candidates. 5 people, right, that you list on your bingo card.
In order of preference.
Right. My first choice, let's say Brad Lander. I'm a left winger. Second choice, maybe if Giuliani is running, I'll go with Giuliani. And then I'll go with this guy Zorhan. And I'll go with Ramos. And all left progressive socialists, okay? Now, as names get knocked off at the bottom, whoever was voting for that person, right, those votes go to their second or third.
So meaning where they do a tally of all the votes,
yes.
the person who finishes last, they throw them out, say you can't win. Let's look at who put second under your thing, and then allocate those in second place.
The original election with Eric Adams, they didn't organize until the very end. You had Andrew Yang and Kathy Garcia on June 19th. Too late.
But explain what you mean by organize and coalesce and coalitions.
Well,
how can it look?
They had a press conference that said, okay, if you choose me, Andrew Yang, I want you to choose Kathy Garcia, number 2, and vice versa. They waited far too long. Most New Yorkers weren't familiar with it. But it was created by the left wing in Minneapolis and San Francisco. They know how to operate ranked choice voting. And, of course, our own Frank Morano, who's like, I love ranked choice voting.
I'm a big fan, too. They have it in Alaska, for example.
But I believe that this time around, the left wing, especially if Cuomo jumps in. Now, remember, Working Families Party hates him, despises it. He tried to kill them. Instead, he killed me and the Reform Party and the Independence Party and the Green Party and the Libertarian Party.
And just so our listeners understand, in New York City, unlike other places, you can appear on ballots of more than one party.
Yeah. And many of these independent parties had their own candidates.
Right.
It was great for democracy. But Andrew Cuomo, no, you're running Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City. That's it, Working Families Party. I'm going to make it so difficult. I'm going to drive you out of existence. You know what he ended up doing? He created a stronger Working Families Party, which now with the Conservative Party are the only 2 independent lines. The rest of us, we were left to the sidelines.
Right. But when it comes to the ranked choice voting,
yes,
even if you want to kind of tell your voters, if you're voting for me, number 1, vote for Mr. Jones, number 2, I don't even know if that kind of thing works. The more important dynamic that you set out is that unlike in the past where, okay, 5 people all want to be in that liberal lane, they would cannibalize each other. No, it'll emerge that all of those votes will eventually get to one liberal person or one left person.
So it could lift them. Eric Adams says he's running no matter what. You have Cuomo, the prospect of Cuomo. Now, if the rumor about Tish James is true, that clears out the left progressive lane. I don't think anybody's going to challenge her on the left progressive lane. So that's a problem for Cuomo.
She's our attorney general who has been talked about. I don't believe it, to be honest, who's been talked about.
No, but I think that was a stop Cuomo moment. Because remember, he had momentum up until the point where you mentioned Tish James. And she's actually called many of the union leaders and the big guys in business and big gals. And they've said, if you're running, I'm supporting you.
Well, you see, this is what I don't think Tish James thought through. And the state legislature thought through when they forced out Cuomo. When they forced him out, they created a distortion in the field, so to speak, that it was supposed to be Tish James coming on next.
Yep.
And then it was not supposed to be Hochul. Now that Tish James has not moved up, her position as Attorney General has clogged up a lot of things. A lot of people want to run for that. But as it impacts Curtis Sliwa, there was another guy that got in the race again, to show my level of preparation here. He's a lawyer, conservative guy. I doubt many of our listeners would have heard. Well, I shouldn't say conservative guy. He's
been on both sides.
He's been on both sides of things. And his whole thing is, I'm a corruption fighter. I'm a corruption fighter. I'm a corruption
independent. He's an independent guy, a reform guy.
He says he's an independent. He's going to have to.
He hates Trump.
He's going to have to fish or get off whatever the expression is, sooner or later, and decide, because you're not going to win as a third party independent.
Well, he says he got $500,000 of his own money to put in initially. Look, he might try in an independent line. I certainly don't discourage anybody. More candidates to me are better.
Tell me why you think that.
Why? Because it means you get more opinions to hear from people who aren't just in a box. If you're listening to just the Democrat or Republican Party, all you're getting pretty much is the Democrat or Republican perspective. I like hearing many different opinions.
Well,
I like more debates.
The problem is the challenge had always been when are the primaries? September? No, in June now.
The end of June.
It used to be the biggest problem for Republicans getting any traction is that the conversation would be all about the Democratic primary, and then they'd finally choose a candidate in September, and you basically have a month and a half to pull everything together.
Correct.
So if you emerge as the nominee,
correct.
It's now in June. You've got a full half a year to try to get your message out.
Right. And by the way, if I am the Republican nominee again, some of my worst enemies will be Republicans themselves.
Yeah, but this gets back to the thing we started talking about what color is New York, really. Now, we've had Republican mayors, but only in the strangest of circumstances.
Yes.
We had Rudy Giuliani, which is now a lifetime ago. And that was a function of really out-of-control crime, much worse than we have today. And we also had Mike Bloomberg, which it took 9/11 and incompetent Democrats to make, and $1 billion to make that happen. A more traditional race is really hard. It's what is it? An 8-1 registration advantage Democrats have?
Completely.
Right.
But the city has changed also. Now, you'll look at it, and the old timers will say, wow, the color coordination is pretty much the same. No. White ethnics have faded away. They've either died or gone to Florida. You have white hipsters and millennials, many of them very progressive, very liberal. I looked at the EDs. The areas I got killed in the most were the white progressive areas, not in black or Hispanic areas. Obviously, I won the Asian vote and the white ethnic vote I won. But it was the white liberal progressive, many of them who moved to New York, and they're very left-wing.
Yeah, and it's not what a lot of our listeners think. It's not the Upper West Side anymore. They're still heavy, but it's now places like Brownstone, Brooklyn, Long Island City,
exactly.
Places that there are a lot of those Democrats. Look, but on the other hand, yes, white ethnics have left, but what's replaced them are second, third generation Hispanics who are now basically in the suburbs in Brooklyn. Same with Asians, and
Southeast Asians
and
too.
South Asians who are South Asians less so, but who are registering and voting as Republicans increasingly.
Yes.
So these things change. That's the thing about migration to New York. We all think we know what it's going to mean. Like when I hear Donald Trump and his people say, "Oh, they're importing Democratic voters." I don't know, man. A lot of the Hispanic vote today.
I think in New York City, though, it's because the Republicans are so weak. You can fit them all in a closet. Manhattan is all blue now. There are no Republicans left in Manhattan. There used to be. You had the Upper East Side.
You had the Silk Stocking District of the East Side.
Nothing now. Yeah. It is the bluest of the blue. So the problem you have here is that the media already coronates whoever wins the Democratic primary generally as the winner. It's like, well, there's a general election. I'm not just speaking mayor, but in other races. No, it's a foregone conclusion. Now, when you do that, that's not part of what we talk about in democracy.
I know. It's hard to get around it. It's the same way when they have conversations about fundraising.
But it's also lazy. If you're a journalist,
I agree.
What do you want to do? You want to write about a coronation? Look at what they did with Eric Adams. They said he's the new face of the Democratic Party. In a few years, he'll be in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Curtis,
this guy up.
You don't need to tell me. And the same way with fundraising numbers and polls, they're all about predicting what a number means rather than reporting on an issue today.
Anthony, there were signals about Eric Adams that the media ignored. Because they thought this guy one day was going to be in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
I don't know that. I do think that that a lot of it is is the death of local journalism. When they do an investigation to try to find out if Eric Adams lives at a certain place, and they find a kid-sized shoes where he says he sleeps, and everyone just kind of laughs about it and says, "All right, he doesn't." I don't know. Maybe back in the day, it would be a feeding frenzy for that kind of thing.
Well, a great publication, although it's not my cup of tea politically, is The City. It is supported by donors. These are former journalists, many of them.
It's basically a print version of public radio, kind of, right?
They break all the big stories that then the other publications jump on. They give credit to The City. But you'll notice, first reported in The City. Really great. I mean, in-depth.
I know.
And that's what you need more of.
I don't want to be an old man shouting at clouds, but the death of tabloid, the death of, like, we used to have at Room 9 down by City Hall.
Look at the New York Times. They don't even have a New York section.
Right, and there used to be then that fierce competition had its downside. When my feeding frenzy happened, it was the last throws, and everyone so they went crazy about it. But nowadays, to try to get them to focus on anything, and I was always, an underdog because I didn't have as much money as everyone else did, and I would always try to make the argument, but I have 150 new ideas in these books they've got 2. Keep score of that, and it's much harder for reporters to do it. But let me get to one issue that piqued my interest this week.
Yes.
A member of the New York City Council is proposing that New York City residents be allowed to take sick leave when wait for it, their pets are sick. And I immediately thought of you. I'm now a pet owner. You are probably the most famous pet owner in New York City history. What do you think of that proposal?
Well, that's interesting because my wife was all on board for that, Nancy, because she rescues animals and has to spend a lot of time caring for them when they're sick. Because when they're in shelters, if they weren't sick before they got into a shelter, they're now sick now because, you know, the viruses, everything else spreads. So she's totally in favor of it. I got to really look at it. I got to take it apart and see what it actually means. Is it more days? Are you taking away from normal family days? So I'm going to be a typical politician on this. I've got to read the legislation and analyze it line by line.
I had a very similar reaction in that I suddenly pay attention to pet stories much more than I ever did
before. Of course, because now
that I have a dog.
You have your friend and family member. He's a family member.
Right. On behalf of Curtis Sliwa, Anthony Weiner, take it away, Vinny Medugno.